When my sister totaled her car, my parents bought her a new one that same week. When mine broke down, they said, "You're an adult, figure it out." So I did. 2 months later, I pulled into their driveway in a car they could never afford. My mom pointed and said, "Think you could get us one too?" I just laughed and said, "Figure it out." I, 29M, always knew my sister was the favorite. That wasn't some dramatic revelation that hit me one day. It was just a fact of life, like knowing the sky was blue or that winter came after fall. Growing up, I'd watch my parents bend over backwards for her while I got the scraps. But I told myself it didn't matter. I was independent. I could handle things on my own. That mindset served me well until the day my car died on the highway and everything changed. The engine had been making weird noises for weeks. I'd ignored it because I was stretched thin financially, working 2 jobs to keep myself afloat while paying off student loans my parents refused to help with. My sister never had loans. They paid for her entire college education while I got a firm handshake and a speech about character building. So when my 10-year-old sedan finally gave up, coughing black smoke before going silent on the shoulder of Route 40, I knew I was in trouble. I called my parents from the side of the road. Dad answered, and I explained the situation. The car was dead. The mechanic said the transmission was shot, and the repair would cost more than the car was worth. I asked if they could help me out with a loan, something I could pay back over time. There was a long pause. Then Dad told me I was almost 30 and needed to figure these things out myself. They'd helped me enough over the years, he said. Mom got on the phone and echoed the same thing. I was an adult now. Time to stand on my own feet. I sat in that tow truck feeling something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't anger yet. Just this quiet understanding that I really was on my own. Here's the thing that made it worse. 3 months earlier, my sister had totaled her car. She'd been texting while driving and rear-ended someone at a red light. Her SUV was destroyed. I remember getting the family group text with photos of the wreckage. Within a week, my parents had co-signed for a brand new crossover. They even covered her down payment because her insurance rates had skyrocketed after the accident. When I'd asked Dad about it casually at Sunday dinner, he'd shrugged and said my sister was going through a rough time and needed support. She was 25. I was 29. Apparently, those 4 years made all the difference. I spent the next 2 weeks figuring it out, like they'd told me to. I took buses to both my jobs, my day job at a logistics company and my night shifts bartending on weekends. The commute turned my 12-hour workdays into 16-hour marathons. I was exhausted, running on coffee and spite. But something else was brewing inside me during those long bus rides. I started thinking about why I was in this position in the first place. My day job was stable, but dead-end. I'd been there 5 years, gotten decent raises, but there was no real growth. I'd stayed because it was safe, comfortable. Now, standing on cold bus stops at midnight, I realized comfortable had gotten me exactly nowhere. My sister got bailed out constantly and lived in a nice apartment our parents helped subsidize. I'd been grinding myself down trying to prove I didn't need help. And where had it gotten me? Stranded without a car and too proud to beg. So I stopped playing it safe. A guy I bartended with had been talking about cryptocurrency and NFT projects for months. I'd always tuned him out because it sounded like gambling. But during one of our late-night shifts, he broke down how he'd turned $5,000 into $40,000 in 6 months. He showed me his portfolio, his trading strategies, the communities he followed. It wasn't just luck. He'd done research, made calculated risks, got in early on projects that exploded. I had $3,000 in savings. Money I'd been hoarding for emergencies. This qualified. I spent every free moment for 2 weeks learning everything I could. I joined Discord servers, watched hours of YouTube tutorials, read white papers until my eyes burned. Then I took the plunge and invested in 3 early-stage projects that had solid fundamentals and growing communities. The first one doubled in 3 weeks. The second one went up 400% in a month when a major company announced a partnership. The third one I sold at a modest gain and rolled everything into a new opportunity my bartending friend flagged. Within 6 weeks, my $3,000 had become $28,000. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my parents, definitely not my sister. I just kept working both jobs and riding the bus while I watched my portfolio grow. The money felt unreal, like it might vanish if I acknowledged it too loudly. But I was learning the patterns now, understanding market psychology, knowing when to take profits and when to hold. I wasn't gambling anymore. I was building something. By week 8, I had $67,000. I withdrew $40,000 and went car shopping. I could have bought something sensible. A reliable used sedan that would get me from point A to point B. That's what the old me would have done. But I kept thinking about my parents' faces when they told me to figure it out. I thought about every time they'd bent the rules for my sister while I got lectures about responsibility. I thought about that brand new crossover sitting in her driveway. So I bought a Tesla Model S. Not a new one. Even I wasn't that reckless. But a low-mileage certified pre-owned model in pristine condition. Midnight blue with white interior. It cost $38,000, leaving me with $2,000 for insurance and registration. It was the most beautiful, absurd, petty thing I'd ever done. The car drove like a dream. Silent and fast. The kind of vehicle that turned heads at stoplights. I felt ridiculous and powerful every time I got behind the wheel. For the first week, I just drove it to work and back, enjoying my private victory. But eventually, Sunday dinner rolled around. I'd been avoiding family dinners since the car incident. Made excuses about work or being tired. My parents hadn't pushed too hard, which told me they felt at least slightly guilty about leaving me hanging. My sister had texted a few times asking where I'd been. I'd kept my responses short. But now I was ready. I pulled into their driveway at exactly 6 p.m. My parents lived in a modest suburban house, the kind of place that screamed comfortable middle class. Dad's old pickup and Mom's sensible sedan were parked in their usual spots. My sister's crossover was there too, gleaming white and obviously expensive. I parked the Tesla right behind it. Mom came out first, probably wondering whose car was blocking the driveway. I watched her face cycle through confusion, recognition, and shock as I stepped out. She actually stopped walking, her hand frozen halfway to her mouth. Dad appeared behind her, and his expression was similar, like he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. My sister came out last, and I had to suppress a smile at the way her jaw literally dropped. Mom recovered first and asked whose car it was. I told her it was mine. The question came out casual, but I could see her brain working overtime trying to make sense of it. Dad walked around the Tesla slowly, taking in every detail. He asked how I'd gotten this car. The subtext was clear. How could I possibly afford this car? I kept my answer vague. Told them I'd figured things out, just like they suggested. Made some good investments, picked up extra shifts, managed my money better. It wasn't technically a lie. Dad's face did something complicated. Part pride, part confusion, part something that looked almost like regret. My sister asked what kind of investments, her voice sharp with that particular tone she used when she felt threatened. I just smiled and said cryptocurrency and some other ventures. Nothing she'd be interested in. That landed exactly how I wanted it to. She bristled but couldn't push without looking petty. We went inside for dinner, and the whole meal felt different. Usually, conversations revolved around my sister's life, her job struggles, her dating drama, her need for various forms of support. Tonight, Mom kept steering things back to me. She wanted to know about my investments, my work, my plans. How much had I made? Was it sustainable? Could I teach them? I answered politely, but gave away nothing useful. Said I'd gotten lucky with timing, that these opportunities didn't come around often. Dad mentioned they were thinking about upgrading Mom's cars soon, casually asking what I thought about electric vehicles. I told him they were great if you could afford them. Let that hang in the air for a moment. Then Mom did it. She actually asked if I thought I could help them get a deal on a Tesla. Maybe use my connections or my newfound financial knowledge. Her voice had this presumptuous edge, like of course I'd help them now that I could. Something hot and sharp moved through my chest. I looked at her directly and asked if she remembered when my car died 2 months ago. Her face shifted, became guarded. I continued. Asked if she remembered telling me to figure it out myself, because I was an adult. That they'd help me enough. The table went silent. Dad's fork paused halfway to his mouth. My sister suddenly became very interested in her plate. I leaned back and told Mom that her advice had been excellent. I'd figured it out, just like she suggested. And now that I figured she and Dad were adults too. They could figure out their own car situation. Mom's face went through several colors. She tried to laugh it off, said she'd just been asking casually. No need to be sensitive. Dad cleared his throat and said they'd only pushed me to be independent because they believed in me. My sister jumped in, accused me of being petty and holding grudges. I stayed calm. Told them I wasn't holding grudges. I was grateful actually. Their refusal to help had motivated me to take risks I never would have otherwise. I'd learned to rely on myself completely. It was a valuable lesson. I just found it interesting how the rules seemed different depending on which kid needed help. Dad tried to argue that every situation was unique, that my sister had been in a more vulnerable position. I pointed out that she'd been texting and driving when she crashed, while my car had simply died of old age after years of reliable service. I'd been commuting 4 hours a day on buses while working 2 jobs. But sure, she'd been the vulnerable one. Nobody had a good response to that. The dinner ended awkwardly. My sister left first, hugging Mom and whispering something I couldn't hear but could definitely interpret from the dirty look she shot me. Dad walked me out to my car, tried to do some damage control. He said they'd never meant to make me feel less important than my sister. They just worried about her more because she struggled with life skills. I asked him why they'd never considered that maybe she struggled because they never let her face real consequences. He didn't have an answer for that either. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since that dinner, and things have gotten weird. My sister called me twice, both times asking for money. First time she needed help with rent because she'd overspent on a vacation. Second time her car insurance had gone up again and she was short. Both times I told her I couldn't help, that I was investing everything I made back into my portfolio. She called me selfish and hung up. Mom tried a different approach. She invited me to lunch, just the 2 of us. Spent the whole time talking about how proud she was of my success, how she'd always known I'd do well. Then she mentioned that Dad's truck was having transmission problems. They'd been quoted $4,000 for repairs. She didn't directly ask for money, but the implication hung there like smoke. I told her about a great mechanic I knew who might do it cheaper. Gave her his number. Her smile got tight. The thing is, I could help them. My portfolio had grown to over $120,000 now. I'd quit bartending and was planning to quit my day job soon to focus on trading and consulting full-time. I had money to spare. But every time I considered helping, I remembered those bus rides. The exhaustion. The way they dismissed my emergency while throwing money at my sister's self-inflicted disaster. Dad called yesterday. Actually apologized, which surprised me. Said they'd made mistakes in how they'd treated me versus my sister. That they'd been so focused on propping her up they hadn't noticed they were pushing me away. He asked if we could rebuild our relationship. I told him I appreciated the apology. That I wasn't trying to punish anyone. But I also wasn't going to light myself on fire to keep them warm anymore. If they wanted a relationship, it would have to be one between equals. No more golden child and scapegoat dynamic. He said he understood. Update 2. 2 months later, and the family dynamics have completely shifted. My sister's financial situation apparently got worse after I refused to help. She'd been relying on occasional bailouts from our parents, but they've been tightening their belts since Dad's truck repair cleaned out their emergency fund. She had to move to a cheaper apartment and kept posting vague social media updates about fake people and fair-weather family. I stayed off social media mostly, but a mutual friend told me she'd been bad-mouthing me to relatives, saying I'd gotten lucky with some sketchy investments and now thought I was too good for my family, that I was flaunting my money while they struggled. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so predictable. What she didn't know was that I'd been helping people, just not her or my parents. I'd paid off my bartending friend's credit card debt as a thank you for getting me into crypto. I'd sent money to a cousin who'd always been kind to me when we were kids and was now struggling with medical bills. I'd donated to 3 different charities. I wasn't hoarding my wealth. I just wasn't distributing it to people who'd only want me around as an ATM. My relationship with my parents stabilized into something distant but functional. We had dinner once a month. Conversations stayed surface level. Mom stopped making pointed comments about my car or my money. Dad asked genuine questions about my work and seemed interested in my answers. It wasn't warm, but it was honest. Then my sister's crossover got repossessed. Turns out she'd been missing payments for months, using the money for other things and assuming our parents would cover her when it came down to the wire. They couldn't. She called me crying, begging me to help her get it back. Said she needed a car for work, that she'd be ruined without it. I asked her what she expected me to do. She said I could easily pay off her back payments and late fees. It was only $6,000. Only $6,000, like that wasn't double what I'd needed when my car died. Like I hadn't figured out alternatives while working 2 jobs. I told her no. Suggested she look into used cars she could afford, or public transportation, or carpooling. All the things I'd done. She screamed at me, called me a spiteful asshole who was punishing her for our parents' mistakes. Said I was supposed to be her brother. I waited until she was done yelling and asked her where she'd been when I was stranded. If she'd offered to drive me to work or lend me money or even just check in to see how I was managing. The silence on the other end told me everything. She hung up. Haven't heard from her since. Mom called the next day. Didn't yell, which I'd expected. Instead, she sounded tired. She said she understood why I'd refused to help my sister. That they'd created this situation by treating us differently. She asked if there was any way to fix what they'd broken. I thought about it for a long time. Finally told her that I didn't need an apology at this point. What I needed was for them to let my sister fall. To stop catching her every time she made a bad decision. To let her experience real consequences and learn to build herself back up. If they kept enabling her, nothing would ever change. Mom said that was hard to do as a parent. I told her it had been hard to take the bus for 2 months too. That hard thing sometimes needed to happen. Update 3. It's been 6 months since everything started. My life looks completely different now. I quit my logistics job and I'm trading full-time, also consulting for people who want to get into cryptocurrency investing. I'm making more money than I ever imagined. Enough that I bought a small condo, and I'm planning investments in real estate. My sister got a used Honda Civic with money she borrowed from a friend. She's still living in her cheaper apartment. From what I hear through the family grapevine, she's actually doing okay. Working more hours, going out less, managing her own bills. Mom mentioned she seemed more stressed, but also more capable. Like she'd finally been forced to develop the skills she'd been avoiding her whole life. My parents and I have reached an understanding. We're not close, probably never will be the way we could have been. But there's respect now. Dad asked me for investment advice last month, not for a handout, but actual advice. I spent 2 hours walking him through basic investment strategies. He took notes and thanked me genuinely. Mom still struggles with it. I can see her wanting to fall back into old patterns, wanting to smooth everything over and pretend the past didn't happen. But she's trying. She asked about my life recently, not my money or my car, but my actual life. If I was seeing anyone, what I did for fun, how I was feeling. It was surface level, but it was real. My sister and I don't talk. Maybe we will eventually. Maybe we won't. I've made peace with either outcome. The Tesla still makes me smile every time I drive it. Not because of what it cost or how it looks, but because of what it represents. It's a reminder that I figured it out. That when everyone else gave up on me, I didn't give up on myself. That sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. It's succeeding so completely that their opinion stops mattering. I pulled into my parents' driveway last Sunday for our monthly dinner. Mom was outside watering her garden, and she looked at my car the way she always does now, with this mix of pride and regret. She didn't ask me for anything, just said it was good to see me and meant it. Progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a quiet Sunday dinner where nobody asks you for money and everybody treats you like an equal. Where you park your car without making a point because the point's already been made. I figured it out, just like they told me to. And I'm doing just fine.